This is the Rush Discuss, where the discuss is Rush. All right, welcome everybody to a very special edition of the Rush Discuss. We have a special guest here. We have Professor Brad Birzer, who I'm sure most of you, having come to our podcast through Rush fans, have probably also seen Brad on the Rush fans YouTube channel. And then he also was recently featured on the Something for Nothing podcast, talking about his book on the lyrics of Neil Peart, Cultural Repercussions. But that's actually not why we have him on here today with us. But both of those were very good interviews, and I'd encourage you to go check them out. But Brad is also a professor at Hillsdale College, where he is a professor in history, and you also are a chair of American Studies as well.
That's right. Yeah.
All right. So what we want to do today is discuss Western civilization, discuss Stoicism, and how that affected Neil with his progression in his life, and how it's influenced the lyrics. So first off, I'll hand it over to you, Brad, and kind of if you can just give us basically how you got interested in all of this stuff. What has driven you to study Western civilization and American studies?
Yeah. Thanks, Adam. Thanks, Julianne. It's good to meet you guys. And I'm sorry, I owe you an apology. It was so chaotic to try and figure out how to do all of this. And I got sick and then all kinds of stuff with my just everything in history. So I'm sorry that it took so long to get in contact with you. And I'm very glad that we were able to do this. It means a lot to me. And thank you both for being so patient with me. I'm not sure I would have been so patient with me if I were on your side. So it's great. So Stoicism is actually this really interesting thing, and I get to teach it every year. Stoicism was a philosophy that came out of the Greek era. So not really Greek itself, but kind of what we call a Hellenized era. So beyond Hellenistic, but with Hellenist era. And it was an idea that came about with the advent of the destroying of Athens and other city-states. So people were trying to figure out, what did it mean to be a citizen of the world when you weren't a citizen of Athens or of Sparta or of Corinth? And that was one of the major questions that kind of came about with the fall of Greece. And so one of the things that Neil Peart does so beautifully is that he looks at this question of what does it mean to actually be a citizen of something. And one of the things that Neil, as a member of Rush, really believes is that we are a citizen of all kinds of eras, that we're a citizen of a specific polis. That is, that we're a citizen of the polis beyond Athens, but really takes shape in form in who and what we are as a people, and trying to collectively figure out what it means to be who and what we are. And that's an amazing thing because, of course, we're not any longer any members of citizens of Athens or of Sparta, but we've gone beyond that with the fall of Athens and Sparta. And so we're trying to figure out who and what we are and what our human condition is. And that's what Neil is really trying to figure out.
Yeah, I love that in his lyrics. And I know for me, growing up, listening to those lyrics, even not knowing any of the philosophy or the history of it, just especially the one that comes to mind is Territories, where he really, that's a really big part of that message of how do we fit in as a citizen of the world rather than just a citizen of these little pockets. How do we treat the people around us? And I think it's very powerful having someone write those sorts of things in a medium that is so popular. to get people thinking about these things without necessarily even having to have all the background. But I think having the background just makes you appreciate Neil's genius even more.
Adam, I'm totally in agreement with you. And the whole idea that Neil was writing for all of us, I think is just spectacular. And of course, we do lose the polis. And that's not just for us, those of us who teach Western heritage, but we all of us who are members of that, really lose that. And we lose the idea of what Athens is and what Sparta is and what Corinth is and what Thessaly is. All of those things are just beyond who and what we are. And Neil did such a good job of trying to figure out, well, what does that mean for us as citizens? And I think that he really did a great job of trying to show us that we all belong to something greater than ourselves.
So now, what if you can break it down for someone who maybe hasn't thought about these things? What is Western civilization when we talk about it? Because I mean, I'm sure we've all heard a lot of throwing around of in the news of, oh, people are trying to tear down Western civilization, or we need to abandon Western civilization. What is it, and why does it matter? Why do we even keep learning about these really old guys?
Old dead white guys, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, Adam. And certainly when we look at Western civilization, we can think about these questions about who and what we are. And this was one of the things that I think Neil did such a good job at. He tried to make us focus on where we come from and what does that mean for us. And he didn't just dismiss all of these guys as dead white guys, which we could dismiss them all easily for that. But he went beyond that and he tried to figure out, what does that mean for us as citizens of the West? And so I think one of the great questions about that at least comes into your idea here, Adam, of what this question means. We have this idea that Western civilization has always meant this question of who and what are we as human beings? And that's one of the great things that we see with someone like Socrates or Plato or Aristotle, or later on with Cicero in the Roman understanding. It's always this question of who are we as men and women? Who are we to try and figure out what does that mean in terms of our understanding of the West? And that's a very difficult question. And one of the things that Neil tried so hard to get at is this idea that there really is something to our understanding of Western civilization and trying to figure out who and what we are. And that, I think, is really important for just our understanding of the West. But Rush does such a great job of trying to figure that out. And in all of their great songs, they're always trying to figure that out. And it goes beyond the idea of what are we in terms of our skin color or our religion or our gender. It's always trying to figure out, what does it mean to be a human being? What does it mean to be man? What does it mean to be woman? All of these things are really central to the Western project.
Excellent. Yeah, I love it when we can step away from like the buzzwords of the present time and be able to just reflect on what we're actually talking about when we're thinking of these things and why it's still relevant. And I think you said it perfectly, that no matter where we are, no matter what tradition we've come from, I think every one of us wants to know who we are. We want to know fundamentally what is it to be human. Even if we can't phrase it as such, we want to know. And I think, as you said, Rush, with their lyrics and especially the way they present themselves as ambassadors of that message, you can be unashamed of trying to find out who you are. You don't have to try to make your life look like anybody else's, because we're all on the same journey together. And it's going to take different shapes and forms, but fundamentally we all have this question and this yearning to find out who we really are.
Adam, I would even add on to that. So it's something like when we look at Neil, one of the great things that Neil asks is not just who are we, but what does it mean to be who we are? And I think he's so brilliant about that he thinks that we as individuals are not just members of this great civilization, but that we can actually project ourselves onto this civilization as well. And that's what I find astounding with his lyrics, that he really does allow us to be part of this collective, but also to allow us to be individuals as well.
Yeah.
Which is why we're trying to get more people to listen to Rush so they can
always
and explore these things and get past but this guy just has a weird high voice thing, and they like dig deeper. Like the fact that we're having these conversations, is a testament of how deep you can go with Rush and how significant of a band that they are.
Yeah.
Let's get beyond the high voice. Yes, absolutely.
Exactly.
Very well put.
Well, and early Getty, I should say. But.
So how did you come to discover Rush? What really brought you, from discovering Rush, what then brought you to be a huge fan and follower of Rush?
So that's a long question and with a huge answer. So I was in 7th grade and I don't remember what happened, but I got in trouble and I was put in detention in 7th grade. I assume that I was probably just talking too much, but I honestly don't remember what happened exactly. And so I was put in 7th grade with 2 friends of mine, Troy and Brad, also same name as me. So Troy and Brad. But I was wearing a button of Genesis and specifically of Duke, of their great 1980 album, Duke. And I was trying as a 7th grader to explain why Duke was so great. And my friends explained to me why Rush was so great. And I went out that day, even though I was in trouble, I went out and actually bought moving pictures. So that same day that I was in trouble, I went out and bought moving pictures and just fell in love with it right away. I thought, what an amazing band. And so here I am, I'm age 55. And that was back in 1981 when I was 13. So I've been a huge fan ever since I was 13. And what a great moment. I don't remember exactly what happened, but I was in trouble. And thank God I was in trouble because I learned about Rush.
It led you to Rush.
I love that, you can pick up just about anyone who has been a longtime Rush fan and they'll have a moment like that where, I was at something big had happened and Rush was right there. and it just
great.
Yeah, exactly.
So what about you guys? When did you find out about Rush?
So I started way earlier than Julianne. But I was honestly raised on Rush, sort of. Like my mom had on her mixtapes, Spirit of Radio was the first one that I ever heard. It was so long ago that I don't even remember a time that I haven't known that song.
Oh, that's amazing.
But it wasn't until, I was probably about 12 or so when I really started listening more and discovered Rush on my own. So went from just knowing a couple songs to actively trying to find out more about the band.
That's great.
And then, I identified a lot with Neil especially, but with everything about the band, because I was very much into classical music and I played the piano quite a bit, and I didn't feel like I had a lot of friends, and so and we moved around quite a bit, and so Rush was kind of a consistent thing that I could continue to discover and be challenged by the music and challenged by the lyrics, because there were definitely plenty of other prog bands like Emerson, Lake and Palmer. I had a big time where I was really into that. But then you get to a point where you want more than just cool music, and having the cool music plus the thoughtful lyrics was what hooked me and got me to really be interested in thinking about life and thinking about the harder questions in life. And that's what's kept me with Rush all these years.
That's awesome, Adam. Wow.
Yeah. A lot better than mine.
How about you, Julianne?
Yeah, so I did not like Rush growing up.
Oh no.
Teenager. I was like annoyed by it, and it was not my thing. It was like this thing I knew he was into because I've known him since we were 16, and I was like, that's just, and my brother obsessed with Rush. And I'm like, that's just their thing. Like, I don't like this band, whatever. And then it wasn't until we got married, and it was about a year after we got married in 2018 that he's like, all right, we're going to sit down and you're going to listen to every album with the lyrics in front of you. And I was like, all right, okay.
Well, it was kind of a sneaky way.
Well, oh yeah.
Because we had this thing of, I wanted to show her Rush. And so I suggested, what if we took turns showing, we'll pick a day of the week and we'll listen to a full album of a band that meant a lot to us.
Wait, this is part of your marriage?
Yeah. And so so we started with Fly By Night. We listened to all of that. And then she showed me Panic at the Disco.
That's what I was into as a teenager.
Wait, from the Smiths?
Oh, no.
The band
Panic at the Disco. I can't remember which album.
I don't remember. But we were showing like my teenage music too.
Yeah. And so we went back and forth a few weeks. But then after a few albums of Rush, he's like, let's just keep listening to Rush.
I got hooked because I was taken by these lyrics because I'd never listened to the lyrics before and paid attention to the lyrics. And now I was an adult. I was a mom at this point. Like my life had changed enough that I was thinking about life more. And so sitting with the lyrics and listening to every single album, I was definitely hooked at that point. And then for like 2 years after that, I listened to nothing but Rush. Like, I'm not joking.
Wow.
But Rush. And I was a runner, so I would run and listen to Rush like every other day. Like that was my thing. It's funny now because now we're doing a Rush podcast, but I was like so grateful that I listened to Rush for 2 years straight because I was like making up for lost time and like kind of was able to know enough about it before starting a podcast about it. So yeah, it was only a couple of years ago for me, but like completely changed my life really. So that's a lot different from everyone else, but hey, I'm happy to be here.
That's great. Wow. So I've been married now 24 years. We're coming up on our 25th anniversary next summer. Exactly. And my wife has been into Rush since I have.
Oh,
so that's a great, isn't it wonderful?
Yeah.
I'd asked him, I was like, are you so glad I'm into Rush now, Adam? Does that make you so happy?
Yeah. What would you do without it? That's great. Yeah, Julianne, thank you for that story. That's wonderful.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, and like my experience of realizing that these lyrics are more than just lyrics is really fitting for this conversation today. And
yes.
Digging deeper into
Amen.
Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely.
And so I want to turn back to Stoicism in particular because this season, if you will, of our podcast, we're just a refresher on what we're doing with this podcast. I've grouped all of the songs from Fly By Night through Clockwork Angels, paired them up and sectioned them into 14 different categories and then are battling them out. But this bracket is the reflective bracket. And I find that a lot of the songs that I feel are very reflective or that induce us to reflect on our own lives also have a very strong bent of stoicism within there. So for instance, we have some of the songs in here, Heresy, Bravado, The Way the Wind Blows, those sorts of lyrics. And so what is Stoicism, like, as a philosophy? And then we can get into how you would say Neil has incorporated those into lyrics.
Yeah, Adam. So Stoicism goes back to about 322 BC. And it was a figure who was a really important figure in Western heritage, a guy by the name of Zeno. And then he had a favorite student named Cleanthes. So you've got Zeno and Cleanthes. And Stoicism actually means, believe it or not, speaking from the porch. So they used to speak from the porch of Zeno every day. And you can imagine if we just had a similar thing where someone was speaking from whatever, the opening of Walmart or whatever it is, they were speaking. And so Zeno started giving all these lectures about the meaning of Aristotle and Plato. So he was trying to figure out Western civilization. And he essentially argues that all of our lives, which is very, very Neil and very Peart, he argues that all of our lives have meaning, that there's nothing without meaning. And so every person who exists, it doesn't matter if it's Julianne or it's Adam, whoever it is, or Brad, we all have this incredible meaning within history. And so history itself is basically the story of all of these various persons, and this idea that we are individuals. And so Stoicism really tries to figure out, what does it mean to be an individual within this larger society? And so the argument is that there is no such thing as a person without purpose. So every single person, every human who has ever existed has this purpose within society. And society is this great thing that allows us to kind of fulfill who and what we are. So Stoicism is beautiful as just an ideal and a philosophy. And I come from a specifically Catholic background, but I think that there's just something about Stoicism and its paganism that's just glorious about trying to figure out who and what we are as individuals within this larger realm of understanding of who and what we are. And so Stoicism really does try and figure out the meaning of individualism, but within society. It's a beautiful philosophy.
I love that.
That's so cool.
Yeah, because we're both very religious as well. Come from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. But I love the fact that you have all these other non-religious or non-Christian beliefs that can also help us understand where we are in this life. Because I believe that truth comes from all places if we're looking for it. And so I love that, that was a thing that Rush really did for me, was help broaden my horizons past just everything that I took for granted growing up, and be able to question everything without feeling like, oh, I'm overstepping some bounds because I'm questioning something that I've been taught. But that, you can find things that will motivate you to be a better person. And even though it doesn't come from Christianity, or it doesn't come from a source that your parents told you about, that if you're looking for it, you can find things that will drive you to be a better person. And I love that Neil was willing to just put forward these philosophies in a way that 12-year-old me could have a desire to broaden his horizons.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's interesting. I didn't know you guys from the LDS Church, but that, what a great moment where the LDS Church is so much about trying to figure out the individual within the whole collective. And I think Neil is very much a part of that.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
So now we get to talk about some of your favorite songs, but also what songs that you think from Rush best represent this philosophy of Stoicism?
Yeah, so I'm probably stuck in the things that I grew up with.
Mhm.
So I was in 7th grade when I first encountered moving pictures, and then I was in 8th grade when I first encountered Signals. And I love both of those albums. I think they're both so much about the individual within the community, and they still, even though I'm 55, they speak to me today. And I love those albums. But also Grace Under Pressure, I think, is an amazing album. It was probably, for me, the most important Rush album. Just that, speaking of who we are within the Reagan era, I think is just amazing as well.
Yeah, those are some of my favorites as well.
Staples for
Yeah,
sure. I mean, they're all staples. No.
That's been an interesting thing, because I had so many years of discovering Rush at different times. There were some albums that I didn't listen to until much later, whereas Julianne got them all so close together.
Yeah, sure.
But yeah, I definitely feel like the synth era is kind of where I always gravitate back towards.
Yeah. Default.
Yeah, it's funny, Adam. I don't actually consider it the synth era. I just think it's the era. So you think about something like Moving Pictures or Permanent Waves or Signals. I mean, all of these things are just so great in terms of trying to figure out who and what we are as human beings. I love it. Absolutely love it.
Makes me think of, oh my gosh, I'm blanking of the name of the song. It's on Signals, and it's about the kid figuring out who he is. Analog Kid. Wow, I'm sorry.
I love Analog Kid.
Of that name. I'm so sorry. That's so embarrassing.
No, absolutely, Julianne.
Analog Kid. Yeah, it reminds me of that song a lot. Like self-discovery and things that are kind of hard for us at different phases of our lives.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking.
I love that song. What a great story. Great bass line, everything. There's just something so compelling about that whole story. I love the Analog Kid. And then the Digital Man who comes after that. It all fits perfectly.
Totally.
Yeah. For me, Hold Your Fire is always that's the album that I will always go back to.
Nice.
I love, it feels like the whole album is just an essay after essay on the human experience. But in particular, Second Nature, I just love
absolutely
the whole balancing act that Neil is trying to do of not just being, we need to tear down these systems that are destroying the earth, or we have to just have absolute technological progress, but like, how can we as humans find a way that will serve us best and preserve what we've been given? And I love that he tackles such difficult questions, and I feel like he does that so well on that whole album.
Adam, what a great album. You think about everything he does with Aristotle on that. So he's just bringing forth all of this great philosophy right on that song, and it's just wonderful. Absolutely.
So why do you think that the band has had such lasting appeal to so many different groups of people? Because, I think we get a little bit of an inkling from just the three of us sharing our experiences. But as someone who's studied the lyrics enough to write a book about them, what would you say has been what's given this band such a wide appeal to so many people?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. And for someone like me, who grew up in the 1970s and then the 1980s, I'm so astounded by what Neil could do with his lyrics and how he could incorporate all of us into those lyrics. And, I think that there's this element, especially again, for me at my age, there's this element where there was this kind of societal desire for conformity. And Neil really fought against that. He fought against this idea that we would conform to everything going on in society. And I think there was a beauty in that. There was a real beauty in his lyrics that he brought us into a kind of alternative story of what society meant. And I appreciate that so much because I understood his alternative story more than the one that was trying to captivate me at the time by my own public schooling. And I just think Neil's great about that he really does try and figure out what is our idea of what a community is, but it's so much beyond what the kind of norm of a community is. I just think it's amazing.
I love that. And that's something I really felt as we've gotten more into this Rush community, just feeling that, there is this link of us all trying to find more, and that we're all interested in self-discovery, that we're all interested in pursuing something more than just what the world would tell you is the most important. And I just think it's so interesting that if you set a higher standard, more people will attempt to achieve that. And I think
yes,
that's what Neil did with his lyrics. He wasn't writing for the masses. He was writing for himself, really. And didn't back down from that, and said, if people are interested, they'll find it and they'll come to it. And I think that's what's kept me so invested in it, is that, and it's inspired us to even do this podcast in the way that we're doing it, because we know there probably won't be as many people listening to this podcast as so many others, but just because it's about Rush. But then even within the Rush community, we aren't interested in doing things that will get listens. We're interested in discussing what is of interest to us, because we think that there's a lot to be uncovered in these lyrics.
Absolutely. So let me ask you guys, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
So within the LDS community, where does Rush fit?
I mean, I think there's a lot of fans.
Yeah. I mean, I
don't know, like, to generalize it, but haven't had any.
Yeah, I think
pushback or anything.
Yeah, I think for the people that I've met who are also fans that are also members of the church, it's interesting. I think we're drawn to a lot of the same things. In particular, free will is one that we love, because that is a very central belief of the church, is that that we believe that we lived in heaven before, and that there was a choice to be made of whether we would follow God's plan for us on the earth, of being completely free to choose, and that would come with the risk of us not choosing to follow him and thus falling away, or then Satan's counter to that of we'll all still come to earth, but there will be no choice, and you will have no capacity for agency, and you'll just plod along and do whatever, but you'll all come back and we'll all be rescued. And so free will, to me, early on, was a huge thing that resonated with me, because the ability to choose, even if someone else is making a choice that we don't agree with, that's their divine right of choice. And so that was something that's always resonated.
That's awesome.
I think that's something that in our church community, the people who are our Rush fans, I think that's something that they're drawn to, as well as the individualist nature, but also the idea that we, through our free will, can choose to make a better world and a better community. I think that those are themes that really resonate with us.
Yeah.
So, Adam, I lived in Logan, Utah for 2 years.
Oh, okay.
And that's my experience as well with the LDS Church. I think you just summed it up perfectly.
That's cool.
Well, glad
Yeah.
that my experience is a little representative.
Yeah, absolutely.
Man, I love this sort of discussion. We could just go on all day, but I know that you are also very busy, in full swing with school. But I also want to just let our listeners know that if you want to find more about what Brad does and more classes that he's done, he took part in a really cool project called Liberty Classroom.
Yes.
Tom Woods, he's a man of many talents, and he has a podcast, and he's a libertarian, and he is a history professor as well, or he was. Now he writes a lot of free ebooks and does a lot of podcasting, but he also put together a group of people who were professors, and they taught subjects in ways that they wanted to, rather than conforming to a curriculum set by a school. And Brad has some excellent courses in there. He talks about
thanks, Adam.
Sci-fi and different themes of liberty in there, and talks about Tolkien, talks about the Old West, and has some excellent content there. So I'd highly recommend checking that out. If you've enjoyed our discussion here, check him out over there, because I really love your presentation style of encouraging us to look past the surface and to really dig deep. And just the excitement that you have when you teach is so inspiring. And so
thanks, Adam. I love doing it. So it's great. I'm glad other people respond to it.
Is there anything else that you would encourage our listeners to check out, as far as things that you do? Or
no, it's so great talking to you both. I really enjoy it, and it means a lot to me that you would actually care what I think. Yeah, that's great. Especially, I mean, I'm at that age where it's like, wow, I can't believe anyone cares what I think. So thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. Yeah, we just want to find interesting voices, interesting people with interesting thoughts to come on and help broaden all of our horizons. Well, I think that's the ultimate. I think that would be the ultimate tribute to Neil.
Like I said, I lived in Utah for 2 years, and it was one of the best 2 years of my life. So I loved Logan, and I love the LDS Church. I'm just so glad that you guys are part of that, and it just means a lot to me to be with you on this.
Well, thank you, and thank you so much for your time. And hopefully we can have you on again as we dive deeper into other songs in the future.
Anytime.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.